hello again, my wonderful friends and history lovers. I'm Lilly, and welcome back to Lilly's Viking Adventure, a channel devoted to exploring the living spirit of the history, saga, and archaeology. Here we bring to light the lives of Viking kings, outlaws, and the quiet souls whose stories were buried beneath centuries of soil and legend in a soft ASMR style meant to help you drift off into a blissful and well-educated slumber. If this is your first time here, I invite you to watch our series on Sverris Saga, the story of Norway's rebel king. Before you begin this one, it's a lesser explored saga, but exceptional nonetheless. A link waits for you in the description. That saga tells the sweeping rise of King Sverris Saga, his battle with the church, and the wars that carved his kingdom. The mystery you and I will explore today springs directly from those pages, a mystery known to historians and archaeologists as the man in the well. So grab your horn of mead, settle near the fire, and remember to pillage that like button before the gods of the algorithm hide this tale beneath the waves. The story begins not with bones, but with words. Words set down in the late 12th century by Carl Jonsson, abbot of Thingeyrar in Iceland, who chronicled Sverre's deeds at the king's own court. Within that chronicle there is a short passage, brief enough to be overlooked by even careful readers, describing the Bagler rebellion of 1197 and the attack on Sverresborg fortress near Trondheim. Jonsson writes that the invaders took a dead man and cast him headfirst into the well, and they filled it with stones. It is one line, tossed off without flourish, but in it we glimpse the raw cruelty of medieval warfare, the desecration of a body, and the contamination of a stronghold's water, vengeance, intimidation, and the psychology of siege bound together. For centuries this phrase lived as mere ink, one of the hundreds of brutal details scattered through the sagas. Then, 7 centuries later, earth and stone conspired to remind us that saga memory can sometimes be literal. In 1938, during early excavations of the Sverresborg fortress site above Trondheim, workers cleaning a shaft believed to be the castle's medieval well found human remains, wedged beneath rubble. The dig was poorly documented by modern standards, for archaeology in that age was still half treasure hunt, half salvage work. The bones were lifted, catalogued loosely, and stored in the University Museum of NTNU. Over time, they gathered dust, mislabeled among other finds from Norway's Civil War era. For decades, the line from Sverris Saga about the man thrown into the well remained an intriguing anecdote, but most historians assumed it to be symbolic, a metaphor of pollution or spiritual uncleanliness, rather than a literal account similar to the account of the lost city of Troy. The saga writers, after all, often blended the allegorical with the factual as archaeological science advanced, forgotten bones began to speak again. In 2014, Norwegian archaeologists led by Ann-Sophie Grav and her colleagues at NTNU reopened the Sverresborg site. Like detectives of a cold case, they re-examined the old excavation logs and realized that the location of the supposed well matched precisely the position described in medieval fortification sketches. Within the sediment, they found remnants of wooden lining timbers, traces of algae and silt confirming that it had indeed once held water. More strikingly, archival photographs from 1938 showed the skeleton's position: inverted, face down, arms askew, the skull fractured. The team decided to reinvestigate using the full arsenal of 21st century science: radiocarbon dating, isotope analysis, and ancient DNA sequencing. It would take 10 years, but the results would turn a saga line into a case study of historical verification. Radiocarbon dating came first. Small collagen samples were extracted from the femur, treated to remove contaminants, and analysed at the laboratory in Trondheim. The date range came back between 1165 and 1215 CE, a near-perfect overlap with the period of Sverre's wars. Forensic anthropologists then examined the bones for trauma. The skull bore a single heavy depression on the left parietal plate, consistent with a blow from a blunt weapon such as a mace or the haft of an axe. There were no defensive cuts on the forearms, suggesting that the blow was delivered from above, perhaps to an unarmed or fallen man. A second, smaller fracture near the jaw showed signs of perimortem impact, meaning it occurred at or near the time of death. These were not wounds of natural causes. They were signatures of battle. Osteological study also revealed that the man was tall for his age, about 1.77 meters, and robustly built with strong muscle attachments on the arms and shoulders indicating habitual physical labor, possibly rowing or carrying arms. His teeth were heavily worn, with traces of tartar suggesting a diet high in coarse grain and salt-cured fish, typical of lower-rank fighting men of the late 12th century. The leg bones displayed stress lines known as Schmall's nodes, evidence of chronic strain. This was a man accustomed to hardship. He was likely between 35 and 40 years old when he died. Yet the greatest revelation came from within a single molar. In 2022, a DNA specialist extracted genetic material from that tooth's dentine. Sequencing revealed phenotypic markers for light hair pigmentation and blue eyes. When compared to genetic reference panels of ancient Scandinavian genomes, his closest match aligned with southern Norway, specifically the Agder and Rogaland region's Sverresborg's garrison in 1197 was composed largely of men from Trøndelag. So this geographical signal suggested the corpse was not a defender, but an attacker, one of the Bagler rebels who stormed the fortress under Danish influence. Historian Sverre Saga of the University of Bergen, author of From Viking Stronghold to Christian Kingdom, remarked that this was a thrilling example of science, confirming what we have long suspected, that the saga chroniclers were working from eyewitness testimony, not fantasy. The isotopic composition of the bones added further texture. Strontium and oxygen isotope ratios reflect the geology and water sources of a person's upbringing. These indicated a coastal childhood, consistent with southern Norwegian terrain, while nitrogen values hinted at a marine-rich diet. Taken together, the data painted a life spent near salt water, perhaps a fisherman or shipman turned soldier. When siege came to Sverresborg, he may have marched north with the Bagler army, fallen in battle, and become the weapon of one final insult. His body thrown into the defenders' well to poison and shame them. What makes this discovery extraordinary is the convergence of textual, archaeological, and genetic timelines. Normally, saga archaeology yields suggestive correlations. A fort that might match a description, an artifact roughly contemporary. But rarely does one find a single individual whose death can be traced to a specific sentence in a saga. As the NTNU researcher Martin Skarstad Lid put it, this is the first time we have identified a human being who could plausibly be the very person described in a medieval Norwegian narrative. It is a cautious phrasing. Plausibly, not certainly. But even plausibility here is revolutionary. For generations, scholars such as Peter Foot and Jesse Bayek have debated how literal the king's sagas were. The man in the well now stands as empirical witness that, at least in parts, the chroniclers wrote true. The circumstances of his burial, or rather his disposal, reveal much about warfare and psychology in 12th century Norway. Wells were sacred and practical alike. They were the heart of a stronghold's life, its source of purity. To defile a well was to curse its keepers. Throwing a corpse into it did more than spoil water. It desecrated a symbol. Historian Knut Heller once noted that during the Norwegian civil wars, siegecraft had as much to do with fear as with force. Contaminating wells, burning churches, displaying heads on spikes. These were instruments of message as much as strategy. The saga's line, "They filled it with stones," carries almost ritual weight. The closing of a mouth, the silencing of witness, the burial of defeat. For decades after the 1938 find, the skeleton lay largely forgotten, but advances in paleogenomics made it newly relevant. The NTNU team published their results in 2024 through collaboration with the University of Copenhagen and the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History. Their article highlighted how cross-disciplinary work, archaeology, forensic anthropology, genetics, and textual scholarship can illuminate the past beyond the reach of any single field. In their conclusion, they wrote that the integration of saga narrative with scientific evidence opens a new frontier in Scandinavian historical research, where literary sources long treated as mythic may be re-evaluated with biological data. The broader implications are profound. The sagas, once dismissed as political propaganda, can now be examined through a forensic lens. DNA not only confirms chronology, but exposes mobility patterns. The man in the well demonstrates that individuals moved freely across regional boundaries. Southern warriors fought and died hundreds of kilometers north. This supports the view advanced by Klaus Krag in his biography Sverre on biography, that the civil wars were national in scope, not parochial feuds. Norway was already, by Sverre's age, a connected kingdom. Equally fascinating are the cultural echoes. Wells appear throughout Norse literature as boundary spaces between life and death. In the poetic Edda, Mimir's well holds the wisdom of the ages, while the Völuspá speaks of the well beneath Yggdrasil, where the Norns shape fate. To be cast into a well was to be hurled into the underworld of knowledge and oblivion. Whether the Bagla soldiers knew these mythic undertones is impossible to say, but medieval Scandinavians still carried the shadow of the pagan worldview beneath their Christian veneer. Thus the act at Sverresborg was not only military desecration, but a symbolic banishment. The enemy driven into the deep denied both burial and resurrection. The skeletal evidence also allows glimpses of the individual's last moments. The blunt force trauma indicates he was struck before or at death. The absence of charring excludes burning, but residues of algae in the sinus cavities suggest he lay face down in water before the well was filled. In other words, he was thrown in soon after death, when the well still held water, and the stones were then piled atop him. As they fell, they crushed his ribs, driving the body deeper into the sediment. The stones sealed him in an oxygen-poor environment that preserved the collagen for 800 years. A macabre stroke of luck for science. If we imagine the scene, the defender's fortress smouldering, the cries of wounded men, the smell of smoke and iron, and the victors dragging a corpse to the well. They heave it in head first, watch the splash vanish into darkness, and then begin throwing stones. Thud, crash, thud, until the echo stops. Perhaps they laugh, perhaps they cross themselves. Then they march away, leaving both victory and curse behind. That moment, witnessed by no chronicler, save perhaps a trembling monk, became ink in Carl Jonsson's hand. then lay buried until our own century uncovered it again. The scientific reconstruction of his face, generated from the genetic profile and cranial measurements, shows a fair-haired man with high cheekbones and a narrow jaw, features common in southern Norway today. The model, displayed at the Sverresborg Trøndelag Folkemuseum, gazes with pale eyes across the ruins where he died. Visitors now peer into the restored well and see a reflection not of legend, but of themselves. History, once abstraction, becomes embodied. The case of the man in the well also reshaped how Norwegian schools teach the sagas. In recent years, educators have used it to illustrate how medieval texts can be tested scientifically. Students learn that sagas are not mere stories, but historical hypotheses awaiting proof. As Neil Price has written in Children of Ash and Elm, the Viking world was both imagined and real, its myths laid upon a bedrock of human bone. This project literalized that statement. Bone and myth rejoined. From an ethical perspective, the researchers treated the remains not as artifacts, but as a human individual. After analysis, the bones were reinterred with a Christian ceremony in Trondheim, attended by both archaeologists and clergy. An act closing the circle between desecration and dignity. The church that once cursed Sverre's followers now blessed one of their victims. It was a reconciliation, 8 centuries late, but deeply symbolic. For historians, the discovery demands humility. It reminds us that each saga line may contain a real human cost. When Carl Jonsson wrote his single sentence about the man thrown into the well, he was recording the suffering of one person among thousands. Today, through science, we can return that man his name of sorts, not the name his mother gave him, but an identity grounded in evidence, flesh, and time. He was a southerner, a soldier, mid-30s, strong-armed, blue-eyed, killed in battle and thrown into a well as an act of war. He is both every man and one man, a silent witness to Norway's transformation from feud to kingdom. Here are some of the final thoughts I'd like to touch on to fully flesh out this incredible saga and its 1,000-year-old mystery. In the Norse worldview, wells were not merely practical sources of water, but powerful thresholds between the mortal and the divine. They appear throughout Norse myth as conduits of fate and knowledge. Mimir's well, where Odin sacrificed his eye to gain wisdom, and Urdabrunna, the well beneath the roots of Yggdrasil where the Norns wove destiny. Water was a medium of memory, reflection, and rebirth, yet also of danger and oblivion. To defile a well, as the Bagler soldiers did at Sverresborg, was therefore more than a military act. It was a spiritual assault, an inversion of cosmic order. Wells embodied purity and continuity, and to cast a corpse into one symbolically poisoned the world itself. The medieval Norwegians who witnessed this act would have understood its full horror. A blending of warfare, sacrilege, and old mythic fear that turned a tactical gesture into a curse echoing through both Christian and pagan imaginations. When examining the reliability of the Icelandic sagas as historical sources, Sverris Saga occupies a remarkable middle ground between chronicle and legend. Composed within decades of the events it describes, likely under the supervision of King Sverre himself, it sits closer to eyewitness reporting than to distant memory. Yet even this saga blends observation with literary purpose. Scholars such as Sverre Saga and Else Mundal remind us that the sagas were written within a culture where truth was moral and social as much as factual, where the goal was to convey meaning, not mere record. The discovery of the man in the well, however, has forced a reassessment. his remains align so precisely with the saga's brief passage that it demonstrates how oral or near-contemporary narrative can preserve astonishing factual accuracy. It suggests that beneath the rhetorical flourishes, the sagas contain veins of documentary truth, the sediment of lived experience hardened into story. Forensic archaeology provides the bridge between that story and the evidence of violence. By examining skeletal trauma, burial context, and environmental layers, modern scientists can reconstruct the final moments of medieval lives with striking precision. In the case of the man in the well, osteological study revealed the heavy skull fracture that ended his life, while soil compression and radiocarbon dating fixed his death to the late 12th century, the age of Sverris wars. Such research transforms battle from abstract narrative into tangible human experience. The swing of a weapon, the collapse of a body, the fall of stones. It also exposes the emotional grammar of medieval violence, where destruction was both physical and symbolic. Through forensics, historians no longer rely solely on written testimony. The bones themselves become witnesses, silent but exact, testifying to the brutality, discipline, and ritual nature of warfare in Norway's long passage from the Viking world into the medieval kingdom. If you followed my earlier reading of Sverris Saga, you'll recall that Sverre himself died in 1202, still excommunicated yet unbroken. The man in the well may have died 5 years earlier. Nameless in the same conflict, both were casualties of a nation's birth. Through their intertwined fates, we see the texture of the era, a world moving from Viking ferocity to medieval statehood, from oral song to written record, from pagan echo to Christian dogma. In that passage from myth to history, wells and bones and sagas all have their place. And so, as this long investigation closes, we find that the mystery of the man in the well is no longer mystery at all but record. Proof that stories endure not only in words, but in the calcium of human remains. What was once regarded as debris has become data, and what seemed allegory now appears to record a lived experience. The language of science has joined the sagas, translating their memory into evidence with the precision of carbon and genome, rather than rhythm and rhyme. Thank you for journeying with me through this excavation of time. If this exploration stirred your curiosity, leave a comment below telling me what you think of the connection between saga and science. And out of curiosity, let me know where you're watching us from. Do you believe other legends hide similar truths beneath the soil? And if you have not yet seen the first part of our Sverris Saga series, follow the link in the description to understand the full sweep of events that brought our nameless warrior to his watery grave. Don't forget to pillage that like button, subscribe to keep our longship afloat in the algorithmic seas, and visit Viking Adventure Gifts to support the channel. Because history, like craftsmanship, survives only when hands keep working. We appreciate you and truly hope our stories add value to your days or nights. Until next time, may your sails catch fair wind, your wells stay pure, and your stories run deep. From Trondheim to wherever you watch, this is Lilly Magnusson of Lilly's Viking Adventure, reminding you that the past still speaks, sometimes from the bottom of a well,